we've got a very special guest in the studio, and this hour with Marco Wenk from NBL. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, dear God.
A statement issued on Friday the 8th stressed that NBL is committed to comply with the regulations put in place by the Namibian government in supporting efforts to combat the spread of COVID-19. But you also said this is very unfortunate that our industry has been brought to a virtual standstill. But we are committed to comply with the directives and are using this time to work with other industry players and stakeholders to ensure that safe and responsible trade can resume without delay. Talk to us about NBL.
NBL has basically been operating in Namibia, believe it or not. In October this year, we will be operational for 100 years. And I think we are, in that sense, entrenched into Namibia and through the Namibian society. Because of that also, we understand the importance of ensuring that we fight together with government, the epidemic of COVID, and to ensure that we really, flatten the curve and do whatever is possible to be able to get out on the other side. And I think that for us was critical, and we are very supportive of government in terms of that, and very supportive in terms of all the directives and regulations that were put in place. Ultimately, the output and the end result obviously is the beer, which is what Namibians are very much enjoying and used to enjoy, and hopefully will enjoy again very soon. We are a very, very entrenched business, and we have got significant amount of SKUs and brands that we have in our stable. Sometimes even people are not aware of that. People obviously know us for our beer, but at the same time also we produce soft drinks, we produce water, we've also very much innovated into the low and non-alcoholic space for NBL, which we also believe is vital, and it's also a repertoire and something that the consumers are really looking for right now out there as well.
Very sought after commodity, and it's on everybody's lips. They're talking about it every day, or the lack thereof. If I can only get a beer. Manu, wat is 'n braai sonder 'n bier? I'm going to friends, but what are we going to do when we get there? Ons het nie 'n lekker koue bier nie. That is what's going on in social media. It's just a zoom of when can we get beer again. But very few people actually understand the process of the distilling plant, the stockpiles, and the distribution machinery, because all of this are affected. Talk us through this process and then the phase. Stockpile, getting back in the market, and distribute again. Explain that to us.
Yeah, I think so. At the end of the day, again, it's a fairly long process until you have the end result. I think, when we look at where we're starting at NBL, normally, obviously, it is to procure all the raw material, the packaging material that is required to actually produce the beer. Now, we have several suppliers of raw material, specifically, our barley and our hops, which in essence are coming from Europe. And then we also have a significant amount of packaging material that we need to procure, i.e. our glass, our cans, our trays, our shrink. Some of that is procured obviously locally as far as possible. Some of that is procured obviously outside the country as well. So once you have procured all the raw materials, obviously your brewing process then starts.
What is the status on the procurement? Because everything closed down. The borders closed down. But do you have in stock? Or is that now part of this puzzle that you have to complete before distribution?
To some extent we have planned ahead. And I think I'm very comfortable that we have done everything possible to be able to continue supplying and to keep a continuous supply once we get going again. We have a very efficient team on the ground that have looked at all those aspects and have made sure that we have buffer stock available. And so, I think in terms of raw materials, yes, we have that. And I think ultimately it will also depend on the demand once we get out of the current stage 2. But all in all, I think we're quite comfortable that we should be fine. We brew according to the Reinheitsgebot, which I think a lot of Namibians also know and understand. So our beer is really pure and of the highest standards and quality. Our brewing processes normally take anywhere between 2 and 3 weeks before we actually have the beer ready for consumption and bottling. And it obviously goes through various stages in the brewing process. Once the brewing process is done, then obviously it goes into the bottling and the packaging side, where it is packaged, bottled, and stored. And that's where most of our beer currently is. Obviously, it's in storage. either within the NBL setup or alternatively with most of our clients.
What about what you've done that's in tanks, containers, whatever you refer them to, that's been brewed? Will that product not go down, and will that not go to waste? So a massive wastage in the meantime, potentially in the making. And how long will it take then to brew again so that you can start to bottle again?
Sure. Yeah, so as part of our lockdown procedure and also stage 2 right now, we obviously are focusing very much on the quality of our beer and our tanks. So, there's always a risk, and, as we also mentioned in the media recently, there is a risk that some of that beer will end up expiring. And I think that is just a given. And I think, also if you look at South Africa and the South African brewery over the past few weeks, a very similar concept on that side as well as our Heineken brewery in South Africa. So overall, beer can only remain in those tanks for a certain time. So NBL naturally, is very much focused on the quality and the standards of our beer. So we have a quality department in-house that tests our beer on a daily basis to ensure that the quality is kept at the highest levels. So naturally, we are going to keep the beer for as long as we can maintain the quality. Thereafter, we will need to commence either discarding it or using it for alternative methods, i.e. potentially to produce sanitizer. But ultimately, if we can't use it, the risk is that it has to be discarded, most of it.
Before we go to the actual losses, just one thing we spoke about it very briefly, and that's the byproduct that you also provide to farmers and dairy farmers in particular. And they are now suffering, and because of the lack thereof, the quality of milk production is actually now in jeopardy. Explain that to us.
Yeah, so Namibia Breweries, throughout the brewing process, produces a byproduct, which is in essence what we call the spent grain. And that, would in normal instances be something that we would discard. And I think over the years, the agricultural side, agricultural industry has basically realized the nutritional value of the spent grain, and specifically the milk industry and the dairy industry. And I think over the years we were supplying most of our spent grain to the dairy industry to support them in the dairy production and the milk production through the nutritional value that the spent grain has. Unfortunately, that spent grain can only be generated once we brew and during the brewing process. And since we were not able to brew, and we've stopped that process on the 28th of March, when we went into lockdown, we could not generate spent grain, and thus we could not obviously on-sell that to Namibia dairies and all the other farmers that are currently using. So it's been quite a important commodity for the agricultural sector, especially during the past years when we had significant drought in the country. But right now, for the dairy industry, it remains critical.
Namibia reported total year revenue of about 1.7 billion in its latest interim results. That means the group generated about 65.4 million on average per week.
Naturally, the pandemic has had a significant impact financial-wise. There's no doubt about it. The fact that we have not been able to sell most of our products since 28 March has naturally got a significant impact, not just on NBL, but any business that has been impacted on this basis. I think for us, the important thing obviously also is to say, once you are not able to sell, we need to look at how else we can become efficient in the business to offset the loss of income, that we cannot generate. And I think that is something that we've been working very hard on as a business over the past 2 months to really understand how we can mitigate the risk around losing all that income. I think the bottom line is it will have an impact on NBL. There's no doubt about it. I don't think any business could survive without trading for 2 months without it showing somewhere along the line. Yeah. So we obviously will report on that, as we get to the end of our financial year, which is the end of June. And naturally, we're hoping, that we can be able to still salvage some of our, of our performance for this financial year during the month of June, when we potentially enter stage 3 and hopefully are given the green light to go ahead.
We all applaud the Namibian government for the immediate and decisive actions to curb the spread of the COVID-19. But of equal concern is the impact which the prohibition has on over 300,000 Namibians linked directly and indirectly to both the formal as well as the informal alcohol trade, because massive amount of trade happening in the north and elsewhere. Now, what happened here? How are you going to deal with that?
Yeah, I think the important thing to understand is naturally that the alcohol trade has been around in Namibia and in many countries, I think all over the world for a very long time, and a lot of people have used that to generate income for themselves, for their families, to sustain their children, to sustain their living, and I think that is very critical to understand, because in terms of our estimates, anywhere between 300 and 350,000 people in Namibia are impacted by the inability to trade in the alcoholic beverages. So naturally, it will have a significant impact on the loss of revenue for those families and for those entities that are very much dependent on it. And in my mind, that also then has a knock-on effect. I mean, so businesses ultimately, will need to look at this and make a very hard decision around whether or not they can keep all, the employees that they have, whether they need to start retrenching, etc. So this is something that we are also very, very vocal about. Is I think Namibia Breweries' number one priority is people, and we always say that our last resort will be to retrench any of our staff. We currently have over 900 people working for us. So the pandemic and the ongoing effects it will have, and as long as the longer there is an alcohol ban, naturally that risk becomes more prominent, and something that we really would like to avoid. Our communication to both the president as well as to government has been on that basis, that we are there in support. We want to support. I don't think that we want to shy away as an industry from the potential social impact that alcohol and alcohol abuse has. It is there and we know it, and it might be the minority of the people that end up abusing it, where the majority is now obviously being impacted by not being able to consume it. But we are clear on that, and I think we want to support. And really that's what we're going to focus on, is to lend a hand to support with that as far as we can. But critical now is that we need to start commence trade as soon as possible. I really hope that by the 2nd of June we are able to provide our world-class beer to the Namibian nation.
What about NBL's export markets?
Yeah, so we obviously have received the approval from the Namibian government that we are able to export. So we have commenced. NBL's biggest export market right now is Tanzania, where most of our beer goes, other than obviously South Africa, which takes the majority of our export beer. So we have recommenced that. But also, as we said, the export market remains a small part of our business. I think our predominant business is done in Namibia. And that's really the vital part of the market, or the vital part of our business, that we need to get going again.
What are the potential estimated losses per month due to the prohibition? And I assume that's, if this should continue, what would the estimates be?
Yeah, I think for us right now, it's obviously extremely difficult to put a number to it. At the end of the day, it can be much higher than if we do not make sure that we are efficient. I think we clearly are a listed entity, and we normally report on a half-yearly basis and year-end basis. So our year-end is on the 30th of June. And we will ensure that we provide an understanding of what the impact was then. I think right now, clearly, all we can say, it does have a significant impact on our business financial-wise, while at the same time we're making everything possible to mitigate that impact.
I think that's all from us for now. Marco, thank you very much for filling this hour with us here with Dirkas. And we just wish you the best with your endeavors and all the plans for the future.
Thank you.
Looking forward to a cold one. Wat sê julle manne? Gaan ons daar wees? There we go. Thank you very much.